Well, I'll give you an example that, in fact, I worked with John McCain on, and that was the issue of campaign ethics reform and finance reform. That wasn't probably in my interest or his, for that matter, because the truth was that both Democrats and Republicans sort of liked the status quo. And I was new to the Senate, and it didn't necessarily engender a lot of popularity when I started saying, we're going to eliminate meals and gifts from corporate lobbyists. I remember one of my colleagues whose name will be unmentioned, who said, where do you expect us to eat, McDonald's? And I thought, well, actually, a lot of your constituents probably do eat at McDonald's, so that wouldn't be such a bad thing. But I think that we were able to get a bill passed that hasn't made Washington perfect, but at least has started moving things forward. I guess the other example where I'm not sure that this was more of a partisan issue, but it was something that I felt very deeply, was when I opposed the initial decision to go into war in Iraq. That was not a popular view at the time, and I was just starting my campaign for the United States Senate.
Yeah.
And I think there were a lot of people who advised me, you should be cautious, this is going to be successful. The president has a very high approval rating, and you could end up losing the election as a consequence of this.
Let me ask it this way. A lot of times candidates are accused of flip-flopping, but actually sometimes flip-flopping is smart because you actually have decided a better position based on the flipped on. You've changed on because you actually see it differently. Knowledge that you didn't have.
Right.
What's the most significant position you held 10 years ago that you no longer hold today, that you've flipped on? You've changed on because you actually see it differently.
Because I actually changed my mind.
You changed your mind, exactly.
Well, I'm trying to think back 10 years ago. I think that a good example would be the issue of welfare reform, where I always believed that welfare had to be changed. I was much more concerned 10 years ago when President Clinton initially signed the bill that this could have disastrous results. I worked in the Illinois legislature to make sure that we were providing child care and health care and other support services for the women who were going to be kicked off the rolls after a certain time. It worked better than I think a lot of people anticipated. And one of the things that I am absolutely convinced of is that we have to have work as a centerpiece of any social policy.
Okay.
Not only because ultimately people who work are going to get more income, but the intrinsic dignity of work, the sense of purpose.
We were made for work.
We're made for work, and the sense that you're part of a community because you're making a contribution, no matter how small, to the well-being of the country as a whole. I think that is something that Democrats generally, I think, have made a significant shift on.
What's the most significant, let me ask it this way, what's the most gut-wrenching decision you've ever had to make, and how did you process that to come to that decision?
Well, I think the opposition to the war in Iraq was as tough a decision as I've had to make. Not only because there were political consequences, but also because Saddam Hussein was a real bad person. And there was no doubt that he meant America ill. But I was firmly convinced at the time that we did not have strong evidence of weapons of mass destruction. And there were a lot of questions that, as I spoke to experts, kept on coming up. Do we know how the Shia and the Sunni and the Kurds are going to get along in a post-Saddam situation? What's our assessment as to how this will affect the battle against terrorists like Al-Qaeda? Have we finished the job in Afghanistan? So I agonized over that. And I think that questions of war and peace generally are so profound. You know, when you meet the troops, they're 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, and you're putting them into harm's way. There is a solemn obligation that you do everything you can to get that decision right. And now, as the war went forward, there are difficult decisions about, you know, how long do you keep on funding the war? If you strongly believe that it's not in America's national interests, at the same time, you don't want to have troops who are out there without the equipment they need. So all those questions surrounding the war have been very difficult for me.
Okay, we'll be back, and we're going to talk about worldview in the next section. Everybody's got a worldview. A Buddhist, a Baptist, a secularist, an atheist, everybody's got a worldview. I wrote or invited people who get my newsletter to write in their questions. We have about 200,000 questions that came in, and I only have 500 in this section. So no matter how you answer these worldview questions, somebody's not going to like them. Because we're all different kinds of worldviews in America. But as people want to know what your worldview is, so as we go through it, these minefields, let's just kind of tick them off, the minefields of America. The first one is Christianity. Now, you've made no doubt about your faith in Jesus Christ. What does that mean to you? What does it mean to you to trust in Christ? And what does that mean on a daily basis? I mean, what does that really look like?
Well, as a starting point, it means I believe in that Jesus Christ died for my sins and that I am redeemed through him. That is a source of strength and sustenance on a daily basis. Yeah, I know that I don't walk alone. And I know that if I can get myself out of the way, that I can maybe carry out in some small way what he intends. And it means that those sins that I have on a fairly regular basis hopefully will be washed away. But what it also means, I think, is a sense of obligation to embrace not just words, but through deeds, the expectations, I think, that God has for us. And that means thinking about the least of these. It means acting, acting justly and loving mercy and walking humbly with our God. And that, I think, trying to apply those lessons on a daily basis, knowing that you're going to fall a little bit short each day, and being able to kind of take note and saying, well, that didn't quite work out the way I think it should have, but maybe I can get a little bit better. It gives me the confidence to try things, and including things like running for president, that where you're going to screw up once in a while.
Okay, let's go through the tough ones. Now, the most...
I thought that was pretty tough.
No, that was a freebie. That was a gimme. That was a gimme. Okay, now, let's deal with abortion. 40 million abortions since Roe v. Wade. You know, as a pastor, I have to deal with this all the time. All of the pain and all of the conflicts. I know this is a very complex issue. 40 million abortions. At what point does a baby get human rights, in your view?
Well, I think that whether you're looking at it from a theological perspective or a scientific perspective, answering that question with specificity, is above my pay grade. But let me just speak more generally about the issue of abortion, because this is something obviously the country wrestles with. One thing that I'm absolutely convinced of is that there is a moral and ethical element to this issue. And so I think anybody who tries to deny the moral difficulties and gravity of the abortion issue, I think, is not paying attention. So that'd be point number one. But point number two